Today, we're going to discuss troubleshooting engagement with virtual learning. When schools shut down in March, we all got an immediate lesson and some challenges presented by virtual learning. While some students might be engaged by the opportunity to largely work independently in front of a screen, for most of our students, this presents challenges. In the classroom, with a quick glance around the room, we can monitor the engagement levels of the class. Who is paying attention? Who's following along? Does the class need a stretch break or a redirection of activities to get re energized? This is not always as simple in a virtual lesson. First, we're going to discuss ways to increase engagement in virtual learning. Then, later on, I'm going to talk more specifically about supports we can put into place to help those students who are struggling. I'm going to talk about lesson design for this first portion, and these tips can apply to either synchronous or asynchronous lessons. The first piece of advice is to simplify and slow down. As much as we'd like to, it just may not be feasible to cover as much material in a virtual setting. Without the monitoring and social learning that happens in a school setting, it can be difficult for students in a virtual setting to engage in an independent task for an extended period of time. While it can be challenging to pare down, this gives us an opportunity to focus on what is truly essential. What knowledge and skills do students need from this course, from this unit? By focusing on these and diving deeper, we can really boost student understanding instead of gliding across the surface of too much content. I'd also encourage you to be choosy about text. Even advanced readers do not always read all the assigned text in a virtual setting. Perhaps you can think back to your own experiences if you had a virtual class as an undergrad or a grad student. It can be easy for students to skim over materials, pick one portion to comment on for a discussion board, and feel done. They engage superficially and do not get much out of the material. You're often better off selecting a shorter, richer piece of text and building in time for deeper engagement with it. Everything we assign virtually has to be broken into small tasks. Students are more likely to engage with something that feels manageable. For example, if we assign a middle school student a 4-page nonfiction reading, giving them a link to a 2-minute video that builds background knowledge, then having a 3-minute video reading the first page of the model and modeling the assigned task, then having students read and complete the task on their own. It feels like more preparation work, and it is, but remember that we do these things all sorts of time in the classroom. We would not design a classroom lesson that gave students a reading cold and told them to make meaning of it all on their own. We can't do that in a virtual setting either. Finally, accountability really matters. Every time something is assigned, like read this page of a science text, a task needs to go with it. Since we can't walk around the room and check for non-engagement, we have to assign a task with each piece of content. A key part of making lessons more engaging is creating instructional videos. Students of all ages really benefit from hearing a teacher explain what it is they need to do. For the most part, videos should focus on the first part of the gradual release of responsibility. I do it. This is where you explain a new skill and model it for students, or maybe even give a short lecture on new content. Keep these short. Research tells us that engagement really drops off after 9 minutes, but know that shorter is even better. Here are 3 tools for creating screencasts that you might want to try. A screencast records your screen as you talk, so you can walk through slides or type out practice problems, and students will hear your voice. Another crucial way to increase engagement in virtual learning is to offer choice whenever possible. Whether it's a choice of text, choice of topic to research, choice of how students show their learning, research tells us this can be highly motivating for students. Giving students the chance to work on a larger project can take this a step further. You can break the project into small chunks and give feedback along the way. In a virtual setting, assigning a large project and giving weeks to work without feedback is a recipe for disaster. And giving students an authentic purpose with the project and a chance to conduct an investigation has the potential to really boost engagement. When we teach virtually, formative assessment is still really important. Every day we need to be providing students with some sort of feedback, and there are many ways to do that. Written feedback on assigned work is important. Many teachers also make writing conferences or other sorts of one-on-one verbal check-ins to work well. If you teach a synchronous class, here are a few tools you might want to try out. Some math teachers I work with found their students hesitant to share answers in a small group on Zoom. Kids who would share in class seemed to just clam up in a virtual setting. To combat this, the teachers would model a problem, then have students try on their own. Students would share the answer with the teacher in a private chat, so she'd have instantaneous feedback, and the students would not have to worry about others hearing the idea. I love this. If you already use Google Slides, you might want to try the add-on called Pear Deck. Pear Deck allows you to insert interactive slides where students answer questions. So after walking through new material with students, you ask them a question, and then their responses pop up on your teacher dashboard. You can scan the responses before moving on and decide what, if any, reteaching is needed. Pear Deck can also work for an asynchronous class. You'll see which students engage with the slides and who answered questions. In this way, it can be a great way to hold students accountable for working through some slides on their own. Edpuzzle has similar features to Pear Deck, but it works with videos. You can take your own videos, or you can find one online and insert interactive questions. I also want to encourage you to be creative with discussion strategies. It can be hard to have good discussions online. Students can do those discussions written, or they can do them verbally if you're meeting in a synchronous class. Trying a specific strategy like a jigsaw, where students learn about different concepts and share their learning with a group, can be effective as it gives a little more structure to the conversation. The first part of this video focused on ways to design instruction in a way that boosts engagement. The second half will focus on what to do if those supports aren't enough. What if students still aren't engaging? This is where we need to build a ladder of support, a plan for re-engaging students. The New York Times wrote a fascinating piece in 2015 about the Catholic College, Xavier University in New Orleans. Despite the fact that it is a school of only about 3,000 students, this university produces more Black doctors than any other school in the nation. The piece focuses on the unique and supportive structure that Xavier's pre-med program has. Rather than doing what most pre-med programs do, which is offer such rigorous coursework without support that the majority of students change majors, Xavier finds a creative and supportive way to teach their students the complex material. They ditch the overly complicated textbooks in favor of workbooks that really break down the complicated concepts. They focus on essentials. They are constantly assessing students and use that data to figure out which students need supports. When students struggle, study groups are organized and professors are available extensively. This is a wonderful example of differentiation and rigor. Xavier is not lowering the bar for its students. Everyone still has to take the MCAT. They still have complicated science concepts that they need to master. They need to pass those quizzes and tests. But rather than simply holding up the bar and telling students to get there on their own, the professors at Xavier create a ladder for students. And this is what we need to do in our own classroom. The first step, which we've already talked about a bit in the first half of the video, is differentiated instructional planning. This is where we narrow in on objectives, give students options for how to share their knowledge. Is it possible that a student could record a voice recording of an answer rather than having it in writing if that still is going to meet your objective? We want to tier instructions based on learner readiness, interest, or learning profile, so provide differentiated options for students where possible. We really want to give frequent assessment and feedback. Go ahead and pause this video to answer the question. If a student did not engage in an e-learning lesson this spring, what did you do? List as many strategies as possible. Here are just a few things that teachers I work came up with. Notice the breadth of strategies tried. Some had to do with the curriculum for everyone, making modifications or differentiation, and some were more focused on reteaching and giving the original student a chance to take an alternate version of the same quiz, so more focused on one-on-one or small group reteaching. While an individual teacher may not be able to realistically provide all of these supports all the time, it's really important that we emphasize that we can't just stop at one option. We can't simply email a student or a family and wait for a response. That might just not be enough. It can be helpful to think in terms of a response to intervention, or RTI pyramid, when we think about supports in our classroom. Tier 1 is where we list differentiation strategies that will be beneficial to all students, so ways we're designing our curriculum that's helping to support everyone. Tier 2 is additional supports that a portion of the class might need. And Tier 3 is more intensive supports that a smaller group may need to meet the learning objectives. Here is an example of a teacher's plan for supports in a hybrid curriculum. This is where students were coming in 1 day a week and had the rest of the days virtual. It's important to think through this process in your particular setting. Are you in person, hybrid, virtual? Maybe you have some students in person and some virtual. And you need to think through what supports look like in this setting. In school, maybe you could have a student who is confused meet with you during independent work time, during a study period, after school. You may now need to conduct these support sessions virtually and be creative about what they look like. Planning for this before it happens can be really helpful. What is your plan if students don't engage? What will these supports look like for your Tier 2 and Tier 3 students? Can you collaborate with your colleagues to make some more support groups happen for kids who are showing us that they need it? Another way that you can look at this process is to brainstorm about a specific behavior. For example, if a student chooses not to complete e-learning work, here is my ladder of consequences that will occur. I hope that by taking time to complete either the pyramid or this ladder, you and your colleagues will make a plan that helps support all your learners to meet your learning goals.